Have you ever heard an expression, eat carrots and your eyesight will sharpen? I certainly did. It was a classic nugget of wisdom shared by my grandparents at a family dinner table. It was also suggested by my friends, especially after that one time when I forgot my glasses at home, strolled right past them on the street without noticing. And I always took that advice, because it seems like a good one. So recently, I had one of those, how old were you when you realized moments, when I learned that this story is not entirely true. In fact, it stemmed from a piece of disinformation so successful, it stuck around for generations. So let me tell you how it started. It was 1940s, middle of the World War II. Royal Air Force in Britain has developed a new piece of technology called Airborne Interception Radar. Equipped with that radar, their pilots became extremely successful in detecting and intercepting enemy aircraft. But they didn't want to share the news with the enemy. They needed a cover story. So they came up with this message saying, our pilots achieved exceptional night vision because they have been consuming large quantities of carrots. And all of a sudden, the news releases, the radio installments starting popping up. British Ministry of Food has developed a cookbook with carrot recipes. They even involved Walt Disney at some point in drawing cartoon characters for kids. But it was 1940s. So it took them a lot of time and effort to share that message, in part because they didn't have access to technologies we have today, such as social media and artificial intelligence. The latter can even create its own text, images, and videos based on the prompts we give it. So let's imagine this campaign in 2024. One day, you go on the internet and it's all there. People sharing their incredible journeys with eating carrots, achieving nighttime vision. Neighborhood groups are sharing locations where to buy the freshest and most organic carrots. Right? You can even ask your own AI assistant to create recipes that are tailored to your diet. And this story is rather benign, but disinformation isn't. In fact, it's false information always spread with a malign intent to mislead, deceive, and confuse people. And it has real-world consequences. So imagine losing your money to disinformation. This is a real story. In 2024, a Hong Kong employee of a multinational engineering company has transferred $26 million to cybercriminals after what he thought was a video call with his CEO and colleagues. Guess what? Those CEO colleagues were never on that call. They were artificially generated deepfakes. Imagine your parents, grandparents get into emergency room because of disinformation. In the UK and France, criminals are using images and audio of famous doctors to promote dangerous cures to common health conditions and scam people into buying and consuming them. Imagine fearing to send your kids to school because of disinformation. Canada's national tip line for sexual exploitation and abuse has processed close to 4,000 cases of sexually explicit deepfake images of children and youth, all in 1 year. And finally, imagine fearing for your life walking on the street because of disinformation. Tragically, this is a true story. Because of false rumors that spread over messenger platforms, people were accused about being child abductors, and they were beaten to death, killed in daylight on the streets of Mexico, Sri Lanka, just to name a few countries. The stories I share are unsettling, to say the least, and 84% of Canadians agree. They recently said in Abacus data poll, we are worried about the spread of mis and disinformation, and we don't know what to do with that. But I hope to change that today. So in my career, I had an opportunity of working and volunteering with communities, organizations, businesses across the country. I learned a lot about communications. I learned about stories of people, but I've also seen how in the last decade disinformation distorts those stories, polarizes societies, affects democracies, and we don't know what to do with that. So I started to study and research disinformation as a threat to national security, ways technology is amplified, and ways to build resilience. And I hope that today we're going to build resilience together. But before starting to root out disinformation, we need to understand why it's so powerful and why it spreads. And for that, we need carrots, once again. So similar to a carrot, surprisingly, disinformation has two parts: the greens and the roots. The greens is something that we can see online, that we come across. It's a content, it's text, video, or audio. But then there are always roots that are the targets it seeks to affect. And it happens so that the roots are things that ground us: our values, our beliefs, our relationships, our institutions, our social cohesion, our democracy. And those who spread disinformation are becoming more creative in how they do it, so it's more difficult to detect. And that's why it's important to look beneath the surface, to dig deeper. So raise your hands if you're ready to dig deeper. Yes? Wonderful. So we are going to start with domains of communication. And when we choose to communicate about something, we interact in three domains: the physical, information, and cognitive. The physical domain is where actions happen. It's real life. Think election campaign. The information domain is everything that is said and written about that event, that story. And then the cognitive domain is the most important one. It's us. It's how we perceive that information and how we choose to act on it. But guess what? Because there is so much information that we receive every day, our brains decided to adapt. And they adapted by developing heuristics, mental shortcuts that help us process the message, anticipate what's going to happen, and decide how to act. And while these are extremely useful, you actually used heuristics by coming here. You're using it every morning by choosing which route to take to work, especially if the traffic in the city is bad. But these heuristics also make us prone to disinformation, and those who spread it know it well, and they use it against us. So let's look at the 4 common techniques. The first one, I call it scientists say. So malign actors who spread disinformation tend to appeal to our authority bias, our tendency to perceive the information that comes from authority as more trustworthy, as more credible. And that authority can be anyone: public figures, celebrities, even a family member in the chat group. So they seek to copy profiles of those authority figures or create false ones on social media and then start spreading their story. The second technique is actually pretty much connected to the first one. It involves flooding the information environment with a false story. So whenever you search for that event or search for that object, the false story is the only thing that comes up, and you see it over and over and over again. And what happens is illusory truth effect that was first discovered in 1977 but still holds true today. Our tendency to believe a story increases with the number of times we see it online. And it's never been easier to spread disinformation. There are 5 billion people online who spend on average 6.5 hours scrolling and searching for information. So once that false story starts spreading, we can expose it here. We can say that it's wrong, but it still travels the internet, and people see it over and over and over again. And that's the next technique. It's because seeing is believing, ain't it? It turns out it is, and our brains are more likely to retain, remember, recall information that is visual. So those who spread disinformation create deepfakes or attach pictures out of context to their stories so we can recall them easier. And a final one, breaking news effect. It involves our emotions. We are more influenced by emotions rather than facts. And when we feel emotional, we tend to act quickly without necessarily thinking about it. So those who spread disinformation want to trigger that emotion from us, whether it's anger or fear or shock or distrust. And then they build that emotion up. And that's how polarizing stories spread. And that's how societies get disrupted. So what do we do with all this? Well, we build resilience. And resilience, I learned, has 3 stages: prepare, detect, and respond. So for the prepare stage, we're going to learn the April Fool's Day technique that I came up with. So April Fool's Day, you go on the internet, you see all those shocking, unusual stories that are out there, and you may think to yourself, I may check on that, may verify that story, because it may end up being a practical joke, right? So this is tip number one. Have that healthy dose of skepticism towards what you see online. But it's not enough. We need to learn how to engage with information critically. And the easiest way to do it, ask questions. Who, what, how, and why? Who's sharing that story? Is that an account that existed for 2 days, that hides behind a strange profile picture and no name? Or a credible news source that has been there for generations? What are they talking about? Is that a well-researched story with sources and references? Or is it just a one-liner that asks me to click on a strange link and go to some website? How does that story make me feel? Do I feel confident that I can make an informed opinion? Or do I feel emotional, angry? Does it want to make me act right away on that? And what are other things that are happening in the society? Why am I seeing this story? What are the other trends that are out there? Asking questions is important, but remember, be critical towards what you see online, but don't be cynical. And I learned that the best way to maintain that balance is by responding, but in a very interesting way. Respond to those who seek to sow division, distrust, who seek to confuse, mislead, and polarize you by doing the opposite. Reconnecting with your communities. You reconnect to learn the nuances, the context, all of the stories that you might not even hear online because how algorithms work. Reconnect with your communities to share the critical knowledge and skills you just learned with those who you care about, your friends, your families, your neighbors, and coworkers. In fact, we actually need those informational literacy programs here at all levels of education. So when you go back, ask your schools, post-secondary institutions, even community centers to start one, so communities can come together and we can dig deeper, discuss news beyond the headline. We can look beneath the surface, because that's how resilience is built from within. And when that resilience exists, no disinformation can get through. So coming back to the story about carrots I shared at the beginning, teaches us important truths. First, disinformation, not new, existed for generations. Its tools and appearance may change with the development of new technologies, but its targets remain the same. It's everyone in this room, everyone beyond it, everyone in the world, and things that we hold dearly. So it's important to practice a critical eye towards the information that you see online, to help grow resilience by reconnecting with their communities, and to always dig deeper into issues, to always look beneath the surface, because a healthy information environment starts with each of us. But you know what? It can only be sustained ensemble. Thank you.